Welcome in, everyone, to Conversations with Dr. Charles Akle. I'm Pat Bryant, the head of branding here at Emmy. Many of you have sent in questions and had comments that you'd love for Dr. Akle to talk about, and we're going to do that today in this special Q&A session with Dr. Charles. But before we do that, let me introduce this astute gentleman you see here. If you joined us before, you know his background, but if you're new to this, Dr. Charles is the Chief Medical Officer here at Emmy. He's a fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons, trained in medicine at Guy's Hospital in London, and he spent decades researching immunology in addition to teaching a legion of surgeons in the UK. So before we dive in, if you'd like to be notified about new material when we create it here, be sure to click the subscribe button just below. And also be sure to go to emmy.co. Emmy.co. That's our website for Emmy, which we're going to talk about today. And Charles, it's a pleasure to be with you again this morning.
Great pleasure, Pat, always.
Great. Well, let's dive in. We've got some great consumer questions. These are all questions that have come in from people who have bought Emmy or were thinking about buying Emmy and had questions about it. So we took some of the ones that were kind of either most popular or frankly that interested us the most. So we're gonna dive into those one by one and give you a chance to speak to those directly in this video. So let's start off with one that I think we've talked about this a good bit and we found quite interesting, and that is, I've taken Emmy, I don't know if I'm feeling anything. So how do I know that Emmy is effective? What would you say to that?
Yeah, it's a common question and it's a great one. The thing is, if your system is in tune and everything's okay, you probably don't feel anything because you're in good condition. You know, when you're breathing and everything's going fine, you don't think about every breath you take or how much oxygen or whatever. When things are going well, you won't notice any difference, certainly in the short term. If, on the other hand, something comes to upset the apple cart a bit, something is going to disrupt your immune system, then that's where you may well notice the difference. That the whole point of the Emmy program is to try and offset the damage, if you like, or changes to the immune system that will make you feel unwell. So if you're feeling well and you're fine, you carry on. You say, well, why would I take it anyway if I'm feeling well? Why don't I just take it when I'm not feeling well? Which is an even more important question. And the answer is that you got to look after yourself. So again, there's no point in saying, oh, do you know what? I'll take exercise and I'll feel fine, and then I'll stop for a while, and then I don't feel. You know, you've got to keep these things going on a regular basis. And there is evidence that if you maintain good quality immune responses, a lot of things that are going to catch up with you as you grow older may well be prevented. Sure. Age is one of the great things that everybody gets excited about. We don't want to grow old. I think you should grow old, but disgracefully and happily. You know, right. Still have fun.
I'd like to be an old man one day, Charles.
Well, there's something to be said. You get great wisdom, but anyway, I think that the real answer is, look, if you feel fine, that's great. You know, you eat your food, you don't think about it. But actually, what you need to do is to make sure you look after your diet and your exercise and look after yourself. And in the long term, you'll get huge benefit.
Yes, you've talked to me when I've asked you this question early in our processes, that you gave me two corollaries. You know, one is there's a cumulative effect over time, that your body becomes well adjusted and you just have this general sense of well-being. You can't necessarily put a finger on it, but I feel good. The second piece is, how many Americans take millions of vitamins every day, and they don't necessarily feel anything, but they do it for a reason, and that's because the research and other indications tell them that it's good for them.
Well, that's a great point. In fact, the latest research on supplementary vitamins is that they probably don't do you much good, and most of it, well, they don't, because you don't need them, or you just poop them out. You know, so it's great if you're a vitamin salesman. It pays for the school fees and the divorce and the new car and all the rest of it. But I mean, unless you are in danger of a diet. You know, you have a very strict diet for whatever reason, whether you're a vegan or whether, you know, there are issues with your gut that require it, then of course you do need supplements.
Mm-hmm.
And athletes sometimes, yeah, they need good supplements. I mean, the best supplement they can have is a really good nutritionist who feeds them well in the first place, and don't worry too much about too many supplements.
Right.
Good food, really, really selective good food, and a good microbiome, because that's what you're trying to do, is to create a really, really good bacterial meal. Well, not just bacterial, but we can come on to that in a second, but the whole of the microbiome story is so important, and feeding it is going to be the critical factor, rather than worrying about whether you give it this vitamin or that vitamin or
That's
this
right.
protein, that protein.
And if you're watching this and you've not seen our video on microbiome, be sure to go to our YouTube channel and watch that one. It's fascinating. Okay, great. Charles, I'm going to ask a correlated question to that, and that is, why should I take Emmy every day? Why is that important?
Oh, that's easy. I mean, it's the same way that you need to take all sorts of things every day. I mean, you eat a meal, and its benefits occur and finish. You can't just then say, right, I've eaten my weight. So it's a great story. I'll tell you, when my little boy was 4 years old, a long time ago, was so happy about going to school. We were worried about him going to school. So he goes to school, and we say, did you have a nice time at school? So, oh yeah, it was fantastic. It was wonderful. And we thought, hey, this is great. We've cracked this. Anyway, we got him up the next morning and said, right, you're off to school again. And he said, no, I've been to school. I did that yesterday. Let's move on to something new, right? And you think, hang on a minute, you've got to go to school till you're 18.
I'm done with that.
Oh, no, I'm not doing that, you see. So it's a bit like that. You've got to keep taking, you've got to look after yourself, keep learning. And the real reason, of course, is that IMI as a mycobacterium is pooped out. Whether it's alive or dead,
Yeah.
and you know, it's very safe either way, but we make sure it's dead, for just so that there's no discussion about infection or anything. There isn't. The point is, you poop it out, and then you've got to replace it. It's not like lactobacilli or a whole bunch of firmicutes and all these other weird and wonderful bugs that live in your gut. You have to let them colonize, and they can then replicate themselves. The IMI keeps coming from outside. It is a commensal. It is a kind of agent that which was in the mud and your environment, and you have to keep ingesting it, and it keeps having the effect, but you've got to keep replacing it. Good for business, I suppose, but that's the real reason. It's essential to replace it.
It's that consistent exposure that you've talked previously about, that you've got to get on a daily basis. That's why one a day. You know?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. All right, another question, Charles. Can I take Emmy while pregnant and nursing? We've had a lot of questions around that. You know, people are very sensitive to, hey, I'm pregnant now. Is it going to hurt the baby? Is it going to impact the baby? What do you say there?
Well, I think, I mean, that's wonderful. Every mother and father, you know, is incredibly anxious about the baby and the mother. The chances of hurting the mother are almost zero. It's the baby, really, that we're worried about. And that, you know, we've done safety studies and all the rest of it. And generally, the regulators would say that if you're under the age of 3, then probably it would be difficult to prove that, because you wouldn't be allowed to experiment on anybody that young, right? But all the data are that you'll be fine. But generally in pregnancy, you shouldn't be taking any drugs or anything that would worry you. You know, if you're not sure and you're not happy, don't. But on the other hand, a pregnant lady has got to eat well. She's got to eat sensible food. She's got to make sure that she's in good condition, that the microbiome is looked after. Sure, she has to be careful, for example, with unpasteurized material. There are certain organisms that lurk in unpasteurized milk and in unpasteurized cheeses. One of them is called brucella, which is found in cattle and causes early abortion. And the other one that does the same is Listeria monocytogenes, which is found in certain cheeses that have not been processed properly. They've not been pasteurized.
Pasteurized, right.
generally with bacteria and things like that, we feel that it's a bit of a risk taking on a pasteurized process. IMI is already dead, and it's exquisitely unlikely. But if you ask me, can I put my hand on my heart and swear that we did the experiment? And you know me, Pat, I don't like. I think the American word for it is BS.
Yeah.
I deal in.
Hey, that's a British word for it too,
It's
Charles.
become that way. But there's a lot of it about, and especially in the nutrition business, it's made too complicated. And if I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know. And the truth is, we don't know for sure. Therefore, it makes sense that if anybody's got any concerns, that they shouldn't take the risk.
And always, you've said this consistently, always consult with your doctor. We're not giving medical, advice here. The thing that we do know is we have never had anyone who is pregnant say anything other than they've enjoyed using it and continued to use it. There's ultra benefit for those types of people. A strong immune system would be very important to have during pregnancy, because you can't take a lot of things you might take if you weren't pregnant. And also, I've heard that women going through pregnancy tend to have anxiety and stress concerns. So,
and immunosuppression. I mean, if you think about it, I described one of a few things I've done in my life. I described the ultrastructure of the human amnion, which is the interface between the placenta and the baby and the mother. The placenta is what the baby links to the mother to feed on.
yes.
And one of the issues is immunosuppression, because if you think about it, the baby is a parasite on the mother. And by rights, because the baby has got 50% of its genes from the father, it is technically a foreign graft. Mm-hmm. Why is it that the mother doesn't reject the baby? And the answer is that in some cases she does. Rhesus factors. One of the great discoveries was how to deal with the rhesus issue of blood test, because you got the father's genes on the rhesus factor, gets into the mother's blood, she then kills the baby. So it's a wonder of nature to me. It's a fantastic thing how so there is a degree of immunosuppression in pregnant ladies, and that's why they need to be particularly careful with making sure they don't eat unpasteurized material. And if there's any concern, A, discuss it with your doctor, as you say. B, just don't do it and take something else instead.
That's right. And if you think you may become pregnant, perfect time to begin building that strong and balanced immune system that IMI helps.
Vital, absolutely. I mean, and by the way, all that business of I mean, we can touch on this. The microbiome in pregnancy is very important for things like autism. Mm-hmm. Graham Rook, who's been one of the great advocates of the old friends hypothesis and the interlinkage between our environment and our immune system. I mean, one of his thoughts, and various other colleagues, is that the autism is aggravated or triggered during the pregnancy period. The mother's microbiome gets the wrong interlinkage, and she hasn't got a good microbiome. Therefore, that seems to impact onto the baby. It gets even more complicated. I won't make it that way, but it's very important for a pregnant mother to look after herself, to eat correctly.
Yes.
And that way we get good babies, which is what
you and I have talked about extended things into that also. The development of allergies that we didn't see 50 years ago. I mean, you and I have talked about, I growing up, I never heard of a peanut allergy or asthma to the degree that you hear about it today. And so there's extended implications that probably have their roots in pregnancy.
Oh, very, very likely, and early infancy, of course. But you're absolutely right. I was a doctor. I mean, I was a medical student in 1970, and peanut allergy just didn't exist in 1970. I mean, we would laugh if anybody would have come up with a peanut allergy. It's like being allergic to chocolate. We can't or whatever.
I wish I were.
Yeah, but Yes, I mean it's not just asthma. It's things like multiple sclerosis has rocketed, diabetes has rocketed, the obesity epidemic has rocketed, and obesity isn't just. And one of the things in 1970, I was taught that if somebody was obese, it was because they ate too much.
Right.
And
And
okay, well, you
yeah.
know, there are a few people like that, but it's not as simple as that. You know, if you, I've told you about the twin studies that have been done, where if you take the microbiome from a pair of identical twins, the one is overweight, the other one is thin, and you take the microbiome from the thin one and you put it into the overweight one loses weight. And the same goes the other way. If you take stool from the overweight twin and you put it into the thin twin puts on weight. So there's something really, really extraordinary going on there. And that's why, you know, this whole thing is since 2000, although lots of illnesses have come down, tuberculosis and measles and things because of vaccination, these other conditions have rocketed. And, you know, what is it due to? Modern life, diet, particularly the microbiome, ultra-processed foods, bad idea. Ultra-processed foods, really bad idea.
Yes.
You know, stay off those because it makes no sense to me.
Absolutely. But it sure makes millions and billions of dollars, right?
Yeah,
And then it
yeah,
makes billions of dollars of problems downstream. So,
yeah. Forever thus.
okay, great. Let's tackle another one. This one's going to feel a little similar to some things you just talked about in the last answer. But a question that comes up is IMI safe to take if I have autoimmune issues such as lupus, MS, other diseases, rheumatoid arthritis, you know, things of that sort. And beyond, is it safe? Does it help?
Again, these are great questions. And you know, my immediate answer is because I don't believe in anything other than hard data. We don't have any hard experimental clinical trial double-blind controlled
Right.
data to do that, mainly because it just costs a monstrous amount of money, as anybody in the pharmaceutical industry will tell you, because hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to bring a new drug to market. And that's just for one indication.
Yes.
The truth is, we haven't done that experiment other than by observational data, where people have we've relied on people telling us how they feel.
Right. Testimonial.
Yeah, and that's not sort of category A data. It's soft data, but it's data. You know, nevertheless, you know, one of my dear friends said, if you go to the top of the Empire State Building and you throw off 100 tennis balls and 3 of them float, you've got to explain it, right? So that's it's very interesting. So we get reports all the time of people saying, do you know what, I took IMI and actually I noticed that it was better. And if you think about it, our whole process is predicated on the improvement of chronic inflammation.
Yes.
And chronic inflammation is what underpins most of life's modern ills, but in particular the autoimmune diseases, cancer, etc. There is a commonality. There's a common theme. You know, we're not trying to sort of say this is snake oil or whatever. And you and I have had the conversation that I think the common theme, even below that, goes down to energy potential, particularly cancer, diabetes. It's all to do with the way energy is processed. And I think that's probably the ultimate way that IMI works. And on another cast, once we published some data on diabetes, which is absolutely mind-blowing.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, that's going to be very exciting. But it's all to do with energy. So the answer to somebody with lupus, well, I think with multiple sclerosis, but we think more and more multiple sclerosis is almost certainly a severe form of post-viral syndrome, and it's caused by the Epstein-Barr virus. A friend of mine, dear John Grange, posited this 25 years ago. And there's more and more evidence now coming through that if you respond badly to the Epstein-Barr virus, which is what causes a condition called infectious mononucleosis, I think that's the term that you might know it better under. And severe forms, for example, the African version of Epstein-Barr produces lymphoma, which is a cancer. I mean, you know, Burkitt's lymphoma is caused by EB virus. It was the first virus that was described in man to cause cancer. So is lupus a post-viral condition? We don't know. Is rheumatoid arthritis post-viral? It could be. So all of these are predicated on chronic inflammation. Anything that is likely to help your chronic inflammation is going to work. And there's just one proviso, because there'll be people out there who, like me, were trained many, many years ago in early immunology. And we were taught about Th1 and Th2, type 1 and type 2, if you like, immunological responses. Th1 was good, Th2 was bad. And there was some people would say, well, hang on, if you are using IMI, essentially what you're looking at is treating Th1 type diseases. But if you use it on Th2 and you get a Th2 response, you'll make the disease worse. So you could make rheumatoid worse, etc. We've had no reports of anybody saying that, and you know, there's no reason why, because it's basically a food. You're going to get exposed to this stuff if you go out and roll in the mud or whatever it is, and you know, and play in the countryside. There's no reason why you can't try it. Because if it does make it worse, you'll feel it. And by the way, these diseases relapse and improve anyway. It's very difficult to gauge it, because one day it's great, another day it's not great. That's normal. But if over a period of time you notice an improvement, at least it gives you a chance. It's worth sucking it and seeing.
Absolutely.
But as we always say, if you're in any doubt, go and discuss it with your doctor and make sure. And if he's unhappy, well, don't risk it. You know.
Right. You know, I want to make sure to say this to folks. If you're watching this, be sure to go to immy.co, immy.co, and read the customer reviews there. That's where you're going to find people who say, and we're not prompting them, they're simply writing this out of their own regard. You know, I had fibromyalgia, or I've had it for years. I haven't been able to really get going until noon every day. Now I'm able to get out of bed. This isn't us talking about it. It's people giving testimonials to say, I had this condition. I may still have it, probably do, but I've noticed a change. And that's really a great indication. You know, Charles, you've also talked about, to me several times, about IMI has a way of working with the immune system to tell it what to attack and what to not attack. It's an orchestrator. Tell us again a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the big word for the two things is immunoregulation and immunoadjuvants. So immunoregulation is what these conditions do to tune and direct the immune response. The immune system is unbelievably complex. I mean, if you think the instruments in a full-blown symphony orchestra are complicated, I mean, you're not even touching the surface. Every week we find some new cell or some new variation. AI is already having to be used and struggling, trying to understand the immune system, right? But think of it as an orchestra, as you said. Every orchestra needs a conductor. It needs to be, you know, the beat has got to be kept. It's got to be kept in tune or loud or reduced in volume, whatever, and what music to play. So that's the immunoregulatory benefit of IMI and a number of organisms like it. Yeah, and by the way, worms can do that. So all sorts of things can do it. But
they're finding worms now.
Yeah. Feeding people worms is not that easy, although it's been tried for ulcerative colitis. The other thing, immunoadjuvants, is the fact that IMI seems to work like BCG and these other mycobacteria. The beauty of them, because they've been integrated with the relationship with human beings for 2 or 3 million years at least, is you don't get a response from the immune system as a rule unless there's a broker, unless there's an adjuvant. So in tetanus toxoid, for example, everybody's heard about being vaccinated for tetanus, for example. That's not controversial, I hope.
Rusty nail syndrome.
Rusty nails, etc. So if you give people tetanus poison, a tiny dose, people think, well, you know, you get used to it, and then when the big dose comes along, you're fine. It doesn't quite work that way, because if you give tetanus toxoid to most people in small amount, 99% probably won't even notice it's there. You need to stick it onto an adjuvant to induce a noise so that the immune response picks it up. It's like ringing a bell with Pavlov's dogs to
You've
come
called it a broker in the past.
it's like a broker. Yeah.
You need a broker to work on your behalf.
Yeah, and call in the immune system and say, hey,
Yeah.
guys, look, I think this is worth looking at, or this is, ignore this. And actually, the immune system, 99.9% of the time, is told, look, don't respond. There's no need. This pollen that you've just ingested is completely not going to do you any harm at all. So just forget it, ignore it. But in a small percentage, the pollen comes in and the alarm bells go, and what do you get? Asthma. And it can actually kill you. You die in asthma.
Wow.
Because you kill yourself. It's not the pollen that kills you; it's your immune response that kills you. And you know, in SARS-CoV, COVID-19, for example, the lethality of it is to do with an abnormal immune response that kills you, not the virus. So the adjuvant is important in terms of directing that immune response as well. And IMI has that role in both cases, but at a much, hopefully, safer level than these other beasts. So yeah.
Fascinating. Okay, great. I want to go to something that, if you've watched the other questions in this session that you've made mention of, and let's dive a little deeper into it, because I know you've been working on this recently quite a bit. And that is, does IMI have any positive effects on long haul COVID? Or, you know, whatever manifestation or name that people would have, how might those work together? Because, you know, COVID being, as you said many times, really a malfunction of the immune system that's actually signaling attack the body. How would you speak to that?
Well, the formal name is long COVID.
Long COVID, right?
And more information is coming through. So one of the things I learned relatively recently is that you get, it's a classic case of this post viral syndrome, myalgic encephalopathy or encephalitis, you know, these syndromes that you get after a viral illness that people just, fibromyalgia, for example,
yes.
that patients, they're very real symptoms, and they go to the doctor does all the tests, everything is normal, and so there's nothing wrong with you, and the patient is ignored, and that is appalling. It's really bad, and we can have a discussion about that. But coming back to COVID, we have to thank COVID, because it's only by recognizing long COVID that the doctors suddenly think, oh, hang on a minute, maybe a post-flu thing, maybe these patients aren't as daft as we thought we are. They really do have a problem. And of course, if you run the immunological tests on these patients correctly, you run the engine, you stimulate the cells, you find that they don't work properly. So long COVID is really interesting because it seems to activate bad areas in your immune system, including, for example, the release of Epstein-Barr virus, the infectious mononucleosis virus. You start re-secreting it in your tonsils. And that's really weird, because, you know, where did that come from? And the answer is that the immune system is being completely tipped on its head. It's not reacting correctly. The virus gets into the nerve tissues. It's been found in the brain. It's been found everywhere. It's a nasty little piece of work. And it affects a big percentage. I mean, 20% for sure, not all of whom by any means make a full recovery. So is IMI likely to help it? Well, we've had, again, based on responses from
testimonial
people who tried it, generally there is a favorable response, and probably just as good a response, if not better, than with conventional treatment, which almost doesn't exist. I mean, you know, what do you do? Cognitive behavior therapy and stuff like that, which is, you know, all very well, just to help you to cope. But we think it does help, because we think it helps to try and retune and rebalance the immune system. It'll take time, and you've got to keep keeping it for maybe months before you actually see a benefit. But you've also got to work on gentle exercise. You've got to look at your diet. You've got to look at your microbiome. You can't just expect that one thing is gonna be that dramatic. It's got to have it's all very well putting petrol into the engine, but if the spark plugs aren't working or the big ends dropped off, you got to work on these things.
We tend here in America, and you may say, well, Pat, that's just a global issue, but we tend to look for the silver bullet.
Yeah.
It's like I want to take it and I want it to work today and I want to be perfect tomorrow. That's just not the case here, right? Even with something that, Emmy, you could say is really the best of nature, working its way back into your systems. What would you say to that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, wouldn't it be lovely if we had we call it a panacea, there was
That's right.
some wonderful magical thing that a love potion or the guy I like is, for those of you who are mad cartoon or comic aficionados, is Wolverine and his healing.
That's
Boy,
right.
wouldn't I like that, and as a doctor, if I could give it, it'd be great. So it's not quite healing factor a la Wolverine, but and he heals quickly. But actually, we have healing factors in our body. If you give it time, you cut yourself. It doesn't heal in 2 seconds like in the movies. It takes 3 or 4 weeks before it heals. So
Yes.
you have to be patient in
And,
biological systems.
and it goes back to what we said previously, or you said previously. That's the importance again of regularity. Take it every day, because you're doing the good in your immune system, and it takes time for that to retune. That's why we tell people on a lot of our messaging, retune your immune system. It takes a little bit of time.
It takes time, and you have to, in the lottery of life, you have to buy a ticket. If you're just going to sit there and not buy. I mean, you got to buy a ticket. You're going to win.
Got to buy to win.
But one of the things, I mean, this brings us to an interesting piece of research that we will want to do, which is to try and perhaps, I mean, it's been done, but they're not really brilliant, is to get an online app system for our clients to have a look at and to report these things and try and collate the data, because now we've got big data, we have artificial intelligence, we can probably filter out a lot of useful information from all this noise that goes on, but because otherwise it's almost impossible to do it by standard routine. So we're still not satisfied with the system yet, that it gives good quality data, and we have to rely on essentially anecdotal things. But don't underestimate anecdotal data. Like I said, 100 tennis balls off the top of the Empire State Building and 3 of them float. That's interesting.
I need to know why.
It can't be magic, but it'll be something.
That's great. That's great. Okay, how about another question? Are there any impacts on Lyme disease from something like Emmy?
Yeah, great stuff. Lyme disease is horrible. I mean, it's like all these post-viral conditions, except it's not a virus, as you know. It's Bergendorfia or whatever it is. Lyme disease is transmitted through a bacterium, and the deer infestation, tick infestation.
Well, and it's tick season here in the U.S., so very relevant comment.
It's very common, interestingly, in Europe. Now, it has been in Germany for quite a long time. It's now got into Scotland. At one time, we didn't see Lyme disease in Britain, but Scotland now has quite a significant, and it's spreading because, of course, deer have now spread everywhere. They're almost epidemic. It's extraordinary. Well, they are epidemic. And so the ticks are the key. But anyway, Lyme disease is horrible. It's terribly debilitating. And if you don't get onto it and treat it early, then you get this post-viral, post-infective, whatever you want to call it.
Almost like long COVID.
It's probably not as bad as the full-blown long COVID, but I mean, how bad's bad? It's not. Right. Yeah. So will it help? Well, it's interesting. John Grange, who I mentioned earlier in relation to multiple sclerosis and Epstein-Barr virus, he was very interested about these linkages, and of course he linked multiple sclerosis to infectious mononucleosis, the Epstein-Barr virus, but there was also this question possibly of other sources of trouble, Lyme disease being one. And I think Lyme disease will benefit It certainly won't do any harm. And if I had Lyme disease, I would certainly try it. I mean, what are the alternatives?
Right.
And I would certainly pay a lot of attention to microbiome farming. I
Mm.
would, I would make sure I take very gentle exercise, don't overdo the exercise, and just try and develop a more positive attitude, even if it just helps you to cope and
Right.
it helps you to create a positive attitude, then that's some way towards helping the underlying condition.
And Charles, speak to that for a moment. That's one thing we don't really we've put it on our website and some of the study information, but one of the key benefits in the research was with lung cancer patients and their countenance, and just the changes that it made in their outlook. Talk to that a little bit.
Well, I mean, this was extraordinary. We used a sister organism called Mycobacterium vaccae. It isn't really vaccae. When we were able to do the full, we could do the full DNA and genomics. It's a separate organism, but very close, and we call it Kyogaense. And that was the original one, followed by Obuense for various reasons we can go into
That
another
was the
time.
lake that it was found
But
in.
the results in lung cancer were fascinating, because initially it was thought, and we're talking a long time ago, that it's a vaccine. And as with a vaccine, you gave one dose and that did the trick. It doesn't work that way. It's not like BCG or mumps virus or
Measles
whatever.
or whatever.
You need to give multiple hits to maintain that immune response. And so some of the patients, this was done at the Royal Marsden Hospital, which is a very, very prestigious hospital in London, equivalent to the Sloan Kettering, for example, in New York.
Sure.
And by Mary O'Brien, and we had a couple of hundred patients with a particular kind of lung cancer. And what was extraordinary was that the first study didn't show any real survival benefit. Of the patients, however, who had multiple doses, more than 4 doses, there was a survival benefit. So that was quite interesting. But that was the only variable. And with immunotherapy, as you know, there are lots of other complex issues. And now, thank God, lung cancer isn't a death sentence. But at that time, if you had lung cancer, you were a dead man walking.
Right.
You were going to be dead in 18 months.
It was just
whatever they did.
Mm-hmm.
So there was this depression that, I'm going to die, right? But what was fascinating was the patients who received the vacci, as compared to the controls who received saline or a placebo. It was extraordinary, because they walked in and the nurses would say, "Why is he smiling? They look well. They didn't lose weight." And you remember I mentioned earlier about, I believe energy is the fundamental currency of what cancer and a lot of modern life is all about. It's the energy thing. We know, for example, cancers steal batteries, the mitochondria, from other cells. And it's all about energy. And what happens with cancer, particularly lung cancer, the patient melts away like wax in front of you, and they get cancer cachexia, and they look terrible. You can tell they got cancer. You don't have to be a doctor.
Right, they look gaunt.
We didn't see that. We did not see that to the same extent in those patients who had the multiple doses. And the nurses would be able to say, "Hi, Mrs. So-and-so, you look great." Even if they didn't live a minute longer.
Yes.
What would happen is they'd remain well. We had a couple of girls go off and do bucket list stuff. One of them went and did a parachute jump. Another one went up on in one of these airplanes that does a parabolic curve, and they get weightlessness. Another one wanted to row across the channel. I mean, they would get out and do these crazy things, which the other patients would just lie there, and they didn't have the energy. So this observation led to Chris Lowry studying the effect of these in experimental animals and demonstrating the release of serotonin, the happy molecule in the brain, which then gave us a clue that there's something very, very interesting going on, other than it's not an anti-cancer agent. It's working on the immune system. It's working on the brain. It's not attacking the cancer directly. It is getting the body to do that. So all that observation is incredibly important, and that's why we now come to using Aurum, and we use it orally. Why don't we use vacci? Why don't we use Obuense? And the answer is we spent £80 million. That's about $120 million developing those other two. And you know, if we started trying to sell that, it would be something like $10,000 a
That's right.
flow.
And I
Which is,
think that's a wonderful thing people need to understand is the decision was made to democratize
yeah.
Emmy and to make it available at a reasonable cost that you can take every day.
Yeah. I mean, it's always been my belief. Maybe I'm too old, but I took up medicine because I rather foolishly thought I might try and help my fellow man. But you know, you try. And you know, if we were going to put Aurum through all the regulatory
Right.
jump hoops and things, it would be millions of dollars, and then the cost would be unsustainable to, you know, Joe Public.
That's right. You'd be getting it through a pharmaceutical collection, and you couldn't afford it. So
no, nobody can afford that now.
right. That's right.
No.
That's great. That's really great, Charles. Thank you. Let's keep going down the list. Will Emmy help my sleep issues? We've had a lot of people, myself included, who have experienced benefits in taking Emmy with their sleep. What do we know or what do we hear about that?
Well, it's amazing. It's what you said, that the number of people who write in and say, do you know, I'm getting a good night's sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the great blessing of sleep is the recharging the batteries and feeling
Right.
better and being able to cope. And it's all part of that well-being, coping behavior process. And I mean, this is an observation that people who take it have made spontaneously, not something that we've been researching particularly. So we haven't done, you know, sleep studies, etc.
Right. We don't make the claim, but we hear so much from consumers.
If you think about it, if you go to sleep and you know, your brain isn't going mad because somebody's you know, you've got some worry or whatever, it's all to do with this coping behavior. If you can cope with what's going on, you're gonna sleep better. You're not going to get your nightmares. You're not going to be tossing and turning. And actually, that of itself gives you a benefit. So anything that makes you feel better, you'll sleep better. And equally, if you don't pay attention to you know, what's causing your problems in the first place, it may be something that it's not Emmy can help you with. I mean, if, you know, if
the guilty conscience won't let you sleep. So
exactly, yeah. So, well, I don't know. Some people do, but
yeah, the hard-hearted.
I think sleep is wonderful, and sleep is a great healer. Literally, I mean, your immune system resets itself. Everything resets itself.
Yes.
Sleep is such a blessing. And we get a lot of these reports saying, "Look, you know, if nothing else, I got a few good nights sleep. I mean, goodness me, that's worth a lot."
And you mentioned resilience and coping a moment ago. We do know that the active ingredient in Emmy has an effect through the gut-brain axis on stress resilience and anxiety coping. So maybe those are related to the sleep issue.
I think so. I mean, we haven't been able to do human experiments, but you know, there are lots of good reports from Chris Lowry and his team, the neuroscientists at Boulder in Colorado. So if you have a mouse model of this, it's fascinating. So you have a little colony of sweet little mice, and they live in a little cage, and they're very happy, maybe 4 or 5 of them, and they get on with each other, and they're perfectly nice, and you know, there's no problem. And what you do is rather mean. You get a bully mouse. It's actually called a bully mouse. So this mouse is a complete bad, you know, bad
playground bully.
Yeah, he's a bully. So you put this mouse who's from a different colony, and he's a real, you know, pain. And he rushes at them, he bites them, he takes their food, he does unspeakable things to their women, he tries to do unspeakable things to the other, you know. I mean, this is a really naughty mouse, okay? And the poor little mice cower, and you see, and they try and burrow under the
get away.
Under you know, the bedding material. They try and hide from this nasty piece of work. You feed them the mycolysibacteria, right? Or you inject them. Mm-hmm. They'll fight him. They say, no, not having this. You're not going to get away with it. And they'll put up a fight.
It's like a courage vitamin.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I must try it with the. No, I won't say it because my wife will kill me later. But but do you know what I mean? Isn't that wonderful that you change behavior to from one of passive submission into one of positive resilience and coping behavior. And you then deal with the problem. And if you have to fight, well, that's probably the only way to do it. So you fight, and the bully mouse then backs off, and life goes on. So it's amazing to watch these creatures, how they respond to this bully. So these experiments are extraordinary. And if you look at the brains, which we can't, I mean, wouldn't it be lovely if somebody'd like to donate their brain, and they absolutely no problem. Like that wonderful thing in Ghostbusters, I'm
Yes.
still about, yeah, fine.
Or Young Frankenstein.
Yeah. So, you look at their brains, you see serotonergic activation, you see a diminution in inflammation. First of all, inflammation rockets up in their brain because of the trauma. And it goes back down again when you treat. So
amazing. And inflammation, as we've talked in several videos, Charles, it's just the root. Chronic inflammation, stress is the root of so many problems.
Exactly.
Great. Okay, great question. Great answers, rather. This is a question that we've heard from a number of consumers, and you can understand it. It can be confusing, but the question is, what's the difference between what IMI does and what probiotics and prebiotics do?
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's a great question. The shells are full of prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics, psychobiotics, goodness knows what other biotics. And I get confused, never mind the ordinary punter, right? And I know a teeny bit about the subject. But basically, the difference is that IMI is not something that colonizes the gut. Most of these other agents are designed to try and improve the, if you like, the welfare of the bacteria, particularly the bacteria in the gut. So using things that promote lactobacilli, clostridial species, all those other things, Akkermanniensis, all these wonderful names that all come out. And I have to say, my views, I think it just gets too complicated. It's not all about bacteria, and I'll explain why in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So you put in these bacteria so they grow in the gut, so they colonize the bowel. That's one thing. The second thing is you give them these other agents like fiber and bran and food processes for the bacteria. So particularly fiber, which encourages these bacteria to grow and gives them something to chew on, right? Which is, you keep a pet, you got to feed the damn thing, right? So that's what you're.
So they say.
Yeah, lots of nice pets in your gut. That's fine. So that's the whole point of this. The thing about IMI is it's dead. It's not, and even if it was alive, it doesn't colonize. It doesn't multiply in the gut, because that's not where it was designed to be. But on the other hand, it interacts because it affects the special immune cells in the last 18 inches or so of your small bowel. So one of the questions is, say, well, do you protect this IMI stuff, so that it doesn't get destroyed in the gut or whatever it is, and gets to the large bowel? Because everybody thinks all the bacteria in the large bowel. They're not. Bacteria are all over the bowel and all over your body, actually. It's amazing. I was a surgeon.
People don't realize it. They freak out a little bit when they find out I've got bugs all over me. It's like,
there's bugs in my liver. There's bugs in my, it is extraordinary. But anyway, the point is that the last 18 inches have these radar outputs, if you like, the Peyer's patches. They're aggregates of lymphoid cells and tissues, which deal with a big chunk of the immunity of the body. Your gut is actually the biggest immune organ in the body. Mm-hmm. But the last 18 inches are so important. And that's where the IMI works. There are these very specialized microfold, or we call them M cells, which detect individual mycobacteria. They detect Shigella, which you've probably heard of. They detect Salmonellas, which again, a nasty bug that you've heard of, and probably a number of other bacteria. So your body's sort of monitoring what's going on, hey, what's happening out there. And the great thing about the interaction with IMI is they like the interaction with IMI. That sends interesting signals into the immune system in the wall of the gut, which then goes all the way through up to the brain. And we now know the message comes back from the brain. And I've talked about the vagus nerve and how important it is, and this Wi-Fi and LAN system, where the vagus is LAN, Wi-Fi is the humoral, the thing that goes through your lymph nodes, etc. So the point about IMI is it interacts with the immune system, it interacts with these other organisms to act as the adjuvant to wake up the immune system to react positively to these other organisms, or so we believe. And that's why IMI is very different to these other pre-post and probiotics, because it's a different, it has a different role, right?
Yes.
That's not to say you shouldn't be taking lots of good fiber.
Right. You've never said probiotics are ineffective or bad for you. You just said they do something different.
They do something different, and you should do it. And what's fascinating is the modern obsession now with bacteria. So you go on to so many different websites, and you send us, say, hey, send us a stool sample. They send us a stool sample, and they measure, oh yeah, you got 25 different bugs in your gut, and we can now tell you that you should be eating more, I don't know, cheese or more bran or more, they're all this spiel. And isn't that wonderful? And they even give you little patches that glucose monitor and measures to your. It's all terribly clever stuff, but there are two problems with that. One is the proper human gut contains at least 40,000, I suspect, different bacteria. So up to you trying to take 20 bacteria and resolve that, because it ain't going to work. Secondly, if you send the same stool sample to two different laboratories, get two different sets of results. If you send two stool samples to the same laboratory, you get two different sets of results. I'm thinking, hang on a minute, there's something not right. And I'm probably shooting myself in the foot with all the important influences that will come after me. But just the final thing is, we know that fecal transplantation, the reason why I'm a bit disparaging about it, is not all about bacteria. In fecal transplantation, we use stool from a healthy donor to treat a sick person, and the one that's indicated by the FDA and all the European things is the treatment of Clostridium difficile. Clostridium difficile occurs in patients generally.
Is that C. diff? Is the abbreviation? Yeah. Okay, C. diff.
C. diff. Clostridioides difficile, if you want its full name. But C. diff is because you've had too many antibiotics, you get the overgrowth of this particular organism. And if you look inside with a colonoscope, what you see is it looks as if somebody's taken a blowtorch to the inside of the colon. It's horrible, and it's lethal.
Yes.
If you treat the C. diff with vancomycin or one of these more specialized antibiotics, you get a 40% cure rate. 40%. If you give them a stool transplant from a healthy person, you get 94%.
That's just incredible.
It's insane, isn't it?
Just incredible.
So you think, hang on a minute, there's something funny going on here, right? Everybody thinks it's the bacteria. So all these clever doctors go out and produce 20, 30 different bacteria. It must be this bacteria, it must be that bacteria. So if only life was that simple, right? So some clever chap decided, do you know what? I wonder if it's the bacteria. So they take the stool sample and they ultrafiltrate it to get rid of all the bacteria. You take ultrafiltration and you put the stool sample into the C. diff patient, you get something like an 80% response rate. So you think, hang on a minute, how does that work, right?
It must have been the bacteria.
What it tells you is the term I use, and I'm pleased to say has been hijacked by all, imitations the best form of flattery. I've always called it dark matter. I've always said that in the stool and in the microbiome, there is a huge amount of dark matter. Like the universe is composed of stars and stuff. The bulk of the universe, anywhere between 30 and 80%, depending on who you listen to, is composed of this stuff that we don't even begin to understand, right? So in the stool, the same thing applies. There is this huge element of material in the stool that we don't understand. Is it viral particles? Yes, there'll be some viruses. Is it bacteriophages, which are these specialized things that live on viruses and bacteria? Is it yeasts? Of course, the yeasts will have all been removed. Is there some product that these bacteria produce, a chemical that helps? Don't know, but we'll find out in time. So all I'm trying to say is that wouldn't it be lovely to have a magic bullet or a single? Life's never that simple. No. And you must be very careful of being, over dogmatic. You've got to keep an open mind, an intelligent mind, and just realize that commercial interests are one thing, but actually getting results is something much more important. That's really what we're after.
Fascinating.
Why
Yeah,
we
it's fascinating. It's amazing. One last thing, Charles, that I've heard you say before. I just want to remind you of it when we're talking about prebiotic, probiotic versus ME. You mentioned ME is a heat-killed bacterium, therefore you can't kill it again. Not so with prebiotic and probiotic colonization in the gut. It's actually quite fragile, correct?
Yeah. I mean, these organisms that you ingest, like lactobacilli and what have you, can either be whole organisms, as tends to occur in fermented food, whatever it is, or you go
Yogurts,
to
sauerkrauts, right?
yeah, exactly, kefir, etc.
Yeah.
Or you and a lot of that actually are digested in the small bowel, so only a bit gets through. The other thing is you get these capsules in the health food shops which contain colony forming units, CFUs they call them. They'll say that this causes too much.
Lactobacillus and
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, lactobacillus of one sort or another,
Yep.
Clostridioides, whatever. And they're the spores, which are the eggs, if you like, that you can grow the thing. So those are different forms of organisms that you can buy and will help you. But at the end of the day, it's all about variety, and you're not going to get variety by going into your local, pharmacy and getting 20 different things. It's not going to do you any good. You're much better off doing it naturally by varying your diet and trying. The one thing I do agree with is they say you have to eat at least 30 different kinds of fruit and vegetable every week. Yeah, I approve of that.
You do that.
Yeah, I do it. Yeah, even I do it.
Yes.
So,
And
what would it cost?
the challenge you've said previously is if you were to get sick and take an antibiotic, you may wipe out half of the herd or more.
You may wipe out 90% of the herd, and worse still, if you wipe out the important 90%, then what happens is you create soil for the bad guys to grow, which is where your Clostridium difficile comes in. C. diff doesn't get a chance to get a look in. If you've got a good microbiome, you crowd out all the weeds. All the bad bacteria are crowded out. They just can't get a look in. If you give them an area where they can grow, woof, off they go, and then they cause problems. So antibiotics are a godsend, but they can be very dangerous. And by all means, take them. But then you just got to work a little bit harder for a while to replenish the organisms that have been destroyed. That doesn't mean you mustn't take antibiotics. That's silly. Antibiotics are absolute lifesaver. God knows I've used them so often in my life. If you've got sepsis, oh my goodness
How would you live without it? Although, I know in America it's an epidemic sometimes that people think I've got a scratch in my throat, write me a script for antibiotic, and it's like, no, not wise.
Yeah. Well, the doctor's under huge pressure to perform, and at the end of the day, that's part of the skill of medicine. Medicine's not a science. Medicine's an art.
Yes, absolutely. Isn't that why they say practice medicine?
Yeah, I'm still practicing after all these years. I can tie a good knot, though. Don't worry.
That's fantastic. Okay, let's do one last question, and this one's probably a little shorter than others, and it's related to a question that we had earlier. We've had a lot of people say, "Hey, what happens if I suddenly stop taking ME? Are there any risks or any issues?" People hear about steroids. It's like, don't stop taking them, wean yourself down. But how does ME work in that regard?
Well, the answer is that whatever, if you had a benefit and it was likely to have an effect, then it may go away. The chances are, well, you won't come to any harm at all. That's for sure. You may not see any benefit, but you won't come to any harm whatsoever by stopping ME. So if you stop it, that's fine. You won't get maybe the long-term benefits that we discussed earlier in terms of whether chronic inflammation for aging and all these the joint control, the vascular control, the mental things. The important thing. I take it as much as anything because I'm now of an age where I begin to worry seriously about Parkinson's and dementia, even though my grandchildren tell me, "Pop, you're a crazy old man. You know, I don't really want to be so I think it's long-term benefit that isn't immediately tangible. You
Sure.
can't put your finger on it immediately, but in the long term, I think it's likely to make a difference. But you stop it, you're not going to see. It's not going to do any immediate harm. I
Right.
mean, no harm at all.
You
So
just lose the benefit, but you don't have any side effects, no issues.
yeah, exactly. There's not. It's not like withdrawal from steroids or things where you have to be extremely careful.
Yes.
And you know, it's very important that you don't stop any kind of medication like that without very close control from your doctor, because otherwise you could come to serious trouble. Yeah, don't do it.
Great. Well, Charles, this has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed the variety of things we've talked about today. And if you're watching this video and you're a consumer of Emmy, or if you just got questions, feel free to send those to us at any time. You can go to the website and you'll see how you can branch to us and send us questions. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll do another one of these sessions where we do Q&A. We may even do one of these live one day. So we hope you've really enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Charles Akle. If you'd like to subscribe, again, just be sure to hit the bell below here and subscribe to this channel. You'll get notified when there's new material here. And also, this is sponsored by Emmy. You can go to emmy.co, that's IMMY.co, and get all the information you'd like there. And we'd love to have you as a customer of Emmy. So again, Charles, thank you so much, and we look forward to doing this again.
Great pleasure, always.